What's good, folks? It's KnightmareFrame here with a new Warframe video coming at you with a God Mode Gauss, built for speed, damage, and even an Eidolon hunter. Gauss is a phenomenal frame and one of the best utility frames in the game. Definitely not a team player, but an excellent solo frame. Gauss has a massive list of passives, and one of them is the insane amount of shield regen depending on his gauge, with all of his abilities synergizing with one another. So please avoid running negative range on Gauss if you aren't hunting Eidolons. Running negative range will kill his abilities, and you start to wonder to yourself, why is it taking ages to build up Redline? His fourth ability changes how all of his other abilities interact with one another. Starting off with his first ability, Mach Rush. This is Gauss's burst sprint ability. It may have him run super fast, but it's also meant for him to crash into enemies and objects. It's a mobility and a crowd control tool. This ability scales from power and range. The range increases the shockwave radius when he collides with objects and enemies. The damage it deals is pure impact. Holding down this ability will allow you to continuously super sprint. However, once the game has registered you've held down the ability long enough, you can let go and keep your super sprinting while holding the forward button. And when paired with the second ability, Mach Rush will deal slash damage on collision instead of impact, causing enemies to take damage over time, but it will still knock back enemies. This will positively impact your battery meter, as every time you interact with this ability, it will charge the meter. While Redline is active, this ability will have a reduced energy cost. Moving on to his second ability, Kinetic Plating. This is Gauss's defensive ability that negatively affects your battery. As long as this ability is active, when enemies attack you, it will drain your battery, especially higher level content. You protect yourself from physical damage types, heat, cold, or blast damage, and this ability also works like Rage or Hunter Adrenaline, converting 5% of that damage into energy. It also grants you immunity towards knockdown and staggers. This ability scales from power, duration, and the battery, going from minuscule damage reduction to 100% depending on the state of your battery. This ability is recastable, and when under the effects of Redline, you gain 100% damage reduction when at 100% battery charge. Also, while under the effects of Redline, you deal more melee damage and stagger enemies. The third ability, Thermal Sunder. This is a great crowd control tool and great with melees, especially when using Condition Overload. This ability has several effects and interactions depending on the two elements. It negatively and positively impacts the battery meter. This ability will inflict elemental damage around the area where it was cast, depending on how you activated the ability, and the area of effect slowly shrinks over time. By quick tapping this ability, it will cause the area around you to deal cold damage and slows enemies within it. With another quick tap, it will freeze any enemies within that area. Holding down the ability will deal heat damage and burn enemies. Casting heat again will increase the damage over time, stacking multiplicatively. You can combine the two elements to create the blast status effect. Casting cold first, followed by heat, will knock enemies away from you. Casting heat first, then cold second, will pull enemies towards you. Cold charges the battery, while heat depletes it. This ability scales from range, duration, power, and your battery level. While under the effects of Redline, casting cold will instantly freeze enemies, and casting heat will give it its increased damage over time effect. Also, while under the effects of Redline, when you combine the two elements, you will deal blast damage and strip armor. Finally getting to Redline, the fourth ability. This has Gauss charge up and supercharge all of his abilities, and it will have seeking projectiles dealing AoE damage. The damage they deal is impact and puncture. Redline also allows your battery meter to get overcharged. When overcharged at 100%, all your ability effects will be at their maximum attributes. Also, when fully charged to 100%, you can no longer lose the battery charge, and you will constantly remain at max on all the abilities for the remainder of Redline. Redline also grants you increased fire rate, attack speed, reload speed, and holster speed. It's best to cast this ability when your battery is at the Redline threshold. When casting Redline, you can combine the energy burst of your Mach Rush to deal a nice damage combination, especially when timed perfectly. Reminder, this gives you reduced energy cost on your first ability, higher damage reduction and melee damage on your second, and increased elemental effects and damage on the third. When Redline is active, it drains your battery meter, so you always need to be on the move, casting Mach Rush and Thermal Sunder to overcharge the ability. This ability is recastable. Deactivating and letting it run out will deal a burst of AoE damage particles, but there is a downside when deactivating it too early. early or letting it run out when the battery isn't fully charged, because you will lose a massive chunk of your battery, and you don't want that. The lower the charge, the more you lose. The higher the charge, the less you lose. Pretty simple. When you run out of redline or deactivate it early while at 100% charge, it leaves you at the redline threshold. Before showing off the builds, these all suit my playstyle, and I try to get the most efficient result from the game modes I play. So the first build is a balanced build for any content, even endurance runs. You can replace some mods to your liking and playstyle. You can run whatever you want, and since I'm using a melee, I'll be running Swift Momentum in the aura for the combo duration, as I like to be in the Zenric Focus School with Gauss. Vigilante Pursuit for the 30-meter enemy radar to help with the pathing and consistent radar. Max Efficiency with a rank 4 Fleeting and Streamline. This will have all my abilities be easier and cheaper to cast. For duration, I'll be running with Narrow-Minded. With 149% duration, I will get 44.7 seconds on Kinetic Plating and Redline. To counteract the negative range, I will run Stretch and Augur Reach, taking the range to 109%, granting Thermal Sunder 13.8 meters and increasing the shockwave and explosion radius of Mach Rush, because you don't want to be under base range. Augur Reach also grants shields and overshields on energy spent. Natural Talent to increase the overall casting speed, making his abilities feel smoother and more responsive. Adaptation for the damage resistance, especially during the moments of when you're building up redline. And finally, Rolling Guard, perfect for engaging and repositioning, and helpful when shield gating has triggered. Power Strength does help, but it's not needed, as base power strength is more than enough. Also, do not run negative power, as that will hurt him. And now for the Eidolon Hunter Gauss. If you're an experienced hunter, you know that any frame can hunt, and any frame can be replaced, as long as you know what you're doing. People who say otherwise clearly have no idea what they're talking about or doing. Gauss will be taking the role of the Synovia DPS. This role needs you to be quick charging the initial lure, blasting Wisp for your Void Strike users, and shooting the Synovias accordingly to position the Eidolon, and make sure to take the cap shot at the appropriate time and port the loot lure. If you have no idea what any of that means, then you're not ready to try this just yet. But I will show you the build if and when you decide to run a Gauss DPS. Only thing that he'll be bringing to the hunt is his utility, the CC immunity, fire rate, reload speed, and holster speed. Ever since the changes to armor and shields, everyone in the squad will run Corrosive Projection in the aura. Vigilante Pursuit for the bonus crit chance on primaries. Max Efficiency, Natural Talent, Rolling Guard for the invulnerability, helpful if your hero forgets to press 4. Adaptation for the damage resistance, especially with the random magnetic and electrical damage. For the Eidolon build, we ignore his third ability, so negative range doesn't matter for this loadout. Vigorous Swap for the bonus damage when swapping to a weapon. And finally, Vitality for some health. Arcane Rage for the additive primary damage upon headshots. You can trigger this by shooting into his head with the secondary during the immune phase and swapping to your sniper and taking the shot. This will give you Rage and Vigorous Swap buff. Arcane Momentum at rank 3, as the arcanes can get bugged when exiting Arcwing. You'll be left with a duration but no buff, so running it at rank 3 will balance out the duration downtime. Eidolon Gauss really keeps you on your toes. You need to be very attentive as Gauss during the hunts. Alright, now that you've seen how he can hunt Eidolons, let's have a look at another fun build, where you have almost base duration and a lot of range, having your red line build up super fast while dealing massive AoE damage. The less duration you have, the faster you build up red line, but don't go negative duration. This is a similar setup to the first build, but I went with prime continuity for the duration to balance out the negative duration from fleeting. So with 105% duration, your kinetic plating and red line will grant you 31.5 seconds. And with 190% range, you get 22.8 meters on Thermal Sunder, while your Mach Rush has an impact radius of 7.6 meters and an explosion radius of 19. Even though the duration isn't so high, you'll be rapidly charging your red line. Natural Talent for the fluidity of the abilities, Rolling Guard for your defenses, and Flow for the large energy pool, as you'll be using your abilities way more often, since this is a spammy loadout than the rest. Alright guys, these are my Gauss builds. If you're wondering why there is no speed build, because there's literally no point, as he is fast enough, and he isn't the best at controlling his speed through the tight and narrow tile sets. I do hope you've enjoyed this video or learned something, and if you did, feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe. For more Warframe content, streams, and so much more, do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.